I'm Teresa Meza. I am a volunteer coordinator for the WasteShed Chicago, and I've been helping organize that event for the past 3 years. So I help coordinate with all the designers who are entering, and I use she, her, or they, them pronouns.
But here I am. Cool. Good to see everybody. I'm Eleanor. I'm the founder and executive director of the WasteShed. I guess DiscarDisco was kind of my brainchild, though obviously there were many people who helped out with that. And it's continued to grow into a larger and cooler event every year, which is just so exciting. Yeah, I use she, her pronouns.
My name is Williford. I'm an interdisciplinary artist based here in Chicago. I love the WasteShed and I love DiscarDisco. It was my third time participating this year, and yeah, it's like my favorite thing ever to do it. And I use he, him pronouns.
Hi, my name is Miranda Barrett. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a designer and sewist, originally from Mississippi. I live in Brooklyn now. I previously worked in the fashion industry, and now I just sew in my spare time. And this is my first time hearing about and participating in DiscarDisco. So I'm excited to be a part of the Chicago community from New York.
Hi, I'm Madeline Stage. This is my first year doing DiscarDisco. Originally from Indiana, but moved to Chicago somewhat recently. So happy to be here. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them.
So my first couple of questions for tonight are for our WasteShed representatives. So Eleanor or Teresa, what do you feel like made this year's event special? Like what was the standout of 2022 event compared to previous years?
Well, every year is really different because every year we have different things going on. The second year was an entire lockdown after doing the first year as our first event. And so this was the first year that we did it as a hybrid event. And we had already kind of established the boxes, but I think what really made it like special was like we had enough word of mouth where we actually had people who were really from out of state participate, and then some of them actually came to Chicago for the live event. So it was very cool to actually meet some participants from last year who we had not ever seen before in person.
Very cool.
Yeah, I would agree with all of those. I think yeah, having it be sort of a combination online and in real life event was really cool because you could kind of, get to know people virtually and sort of see some of their processes and see, their like in progress shots and their unboxing videos and stuff. And then getting to kind of like meet everybody and see their final product sort of in 3D and in real life was super cool. So that was really a lot of fun.
That's awesome. How do you feel like creative reuse in general has changed, maybe since the start of DiscarDisco or maybe just since the start of the WasteShed? Like, what do you feel is new about the creative reuse world?
Well, I guess I can, speak to this. So yeah, I think there's been a lot, there's sort of like interest in creative reuse, I think, kind of goes in waves, and I think we have been in another wave of sort of new stores opening, and I think also like creative reuse centers that are specifically like organizations that are dedicated to diverting art materials and creative materials for reuse in creative or educational purposes. But yeah, I think we've also become a bunch more sort of networked recently, which has been cool. I think, particularly in the pandemic, like a lot of creative reuse centers were really in a tough spot because, we rely a lot on just high volume of small sales. So it's a lot of people coming through and our inventory is very miscellaneous. So I think a lot of us had to innovate pretty radically around what we were doing and how we were doing stuff. So I think it's, talking to other places around the country that do similar things about like what they had, what they did to basically survive and keep their communities together through COVID has been really inspiring. It's a very cool way to kind of compare notes and get a sort of a better picture of sort of the industry nationally.
Yeah, I think also creative reuse has changed a lot since the pandemic because people got stuck in their homes literally. And I think there is with TikTok trends, there's a lot more renewed interest in like kind of hacking up your own clothes at home, like, you know, just figuring out what to do with what you have. So yeah, I think we're in another wave of renewed interest, like Eleanor was saying.
Yeah, I hope so. I know I've been, so Conscious Costume is about reuse of costume materials, be they physical costumes or the materials that go into making costumes, which is why I really love this event, because I think it's so inspiring for what the people in my community do. And I've slowly become connected with other people who are doing this sort of thing with costumes, or Barbara at CCRX, and working more with you guys at the WasteShed. And so I think that networking element is really important to what we've been doing lately. So I think that that's really great. And it's why I love events like this, where we get a chance to like just sort of play in a sandbox together. Great. If there's like one thing that you want people to know about creative reuse or creative reuse centers, what would it be? Is there something that you think people don't know that they should know, or just a favorite little industry secret?
I think for me, I think people don't realize like what an incredible resource it is for the community, and how many different things it makes possible, or makes easier, or makes affordable. It's, you know, just truly staggering the sort of diversity and variety and richness of the sort of projects and just experiences that like the materials that we, you know, divert from landfill go back into in the community. So I think that's a really terrific part of it. And just, you know, yeah, it just blows my mind every day, like what people are working on and the stuff that they're doing with it. It's really, really inspiring. And I think, you know, part of the bit that maybe folks don't think about as much is just kind of thinking about how, you know, the reuse industry in general is, you know, the future of the economy, basically. I mean, we are in a phase where we are using up all of our non-renewable materials as fast as we can. And we are going to be forced back into a time, you know, whether we like it or not, we're going to be back into the sort of the whole prehistory of human existence was using whatever materials you had and making the most of the resources that were available. So that's going to be how we do things again, you know, in probably not too long from now. So we might as well figure out how to do it right, is my thinking.
Yeah, I'm absolutely convinced that landfills are going to be mined in the future for the materials that are in there.
I mean, and they've all been planning for it too, like all the,
yeah,
that's all part of the waste management company's plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Teresa.
Yeah, I guess two things that I think people should know about reuse and creative reuse is one, when you walk into the stores, they are incredibly more labor intensive than you might ever imagine. Mm-hmm. That's part of why I focus on trying to get volunteers in the store, because it kind of helps keep the cost of materials down. It takes a lot of labor to pay attention to everything that comes in and really take the time to properly put it out and make it so that people can reuse it. You know, we get a very small amount of donations compared to other organizations, but we also have like really, really specialized stuff. So it takes a lot of time. And two, I would say that it's the kind of shopping that you should do when you're not in a hurry. And I think you should come at a time when you can let your mind wander. It's like, I think that those are the customers that get the most out of it. So I would say trade secret, it's like come with like leisure time, not in a rush. So that you can look through things and have fun. So
yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, and something that I've been trying to push for a little bit in the theater design world. And I feel like I see similar things in the fashion design world, that we're always working on such tight timelines, and it's always about the turnaround and just find the thing as quickly as possible and get it in so that we can start working on it. And you know, sort of deconstructing some of that capitalist hustle so that we can take time to really get to know the materials and find the right materials and be creative and innovative with the limited materials we have. So yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, is just go slow, take your time. the looks of the participants we have here tonight to refresh everyone's memory. So we have Miranda, Chris, and Madeline. So I'm really excited to dive in on some of this. And I've lost my questions. There they are. So I'm going to stop sharing in just a second, but I want to give everyone a second to look. But starting with Miranda, our furthest flung person, how did you hear about DiscarDisco?
It was actually through Wendy from Minted Media, who worked on producing the show. She saw on my Instagram I had made Audrey Hepburn's Breakfast at Tiffany's dress for Halloween last year. So she had just seen that, I guess, and reached out by email and asked if I wanted to be a part of it. And I love a competition and a theme and working on a deadline. So I was absolutely in.
That's fabulous. Yes. And for anyone who's following along with the trivia questions I was posting on Conscious Costumes Instagram, Miranda is our Halloween fanatic, though I'm guessing probably not the only one, but she's the one who called it out when I asked for fun facts. So Madeline, keep wanting to say Madison because of how you have your name abbreviated. So if I slip up, I'm very sorry. How about you? How did you hear about the DiscarDisco event?
So I just happened to be coming back through Chicago solo. So I had some time to shop and decided to stop by, my favorite fabric stores in Chicago, and was just looking for another place to go. And I think I Googled like craft thrift store or something, and the WasteShed popped up. And so I went and visited for the first time. This was like mid-December. And happened to see a sign and talked to the person working there, and they were all about it. And I thought it sounded super interesting to do DiscarDisco and signed up that night. And I think I was like one of the last people to get a box. I think you guys were running out. So yeah, it just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
That's wonderful. And then Chris, how did you come back to us this year, or how did you hear about it in year one, since you have been our stalwart?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to how I got introduced to the WasteShed. I had a studio that was down the street from the WasteShed, and I would just go there pretty much anytime I would go into my studio and pick up things to work with. Mostly was kind of doing like fine art, kind of like textile sculpture pieces at that time, so like less garments, but I was just in love with like the mission and the affordability and accessibility of it, and it just made my studio practice possible. And then I was kind of looking on an online listing for like different exhibitions and calls for entry, and I saw the Trash Fashion Show, and I was like, this combines everything I love, and I have to just go for it. And I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, I think that's great. So my next question is, can you describe your creative process with your DiscarDisco garment, and how is that the same or different from how you usually work?
For the past few years, I've just been sewing for myself, like in my own spare time. So I can just kind of decide what I want to make and go find the fabric. Whereas for this, it was fun to kind of get back into the more traditional creative process. So since these fabrics were kind of purposely random and unexpected, that was kind of tough at first, but I ended up just sitting with the fabrics for like weeks probably, and just kind of pinning them different ways on my dress form, because I knew that if I needed to at the last minute, I could sew it all night and be done. But I think just taking time to sit with the fabrics was a big part of the process, and sketching and just kind of starting from there and seeing where it went.
Awesome. Thank you. Chris, how about you? I know you've answered this one in the past.
Yeah, I think, I think I just kind of have to lay everything out, and I like to kind of pair stuff that I think I know will sew well together, or could sew well together, or I know we kind of find out that things don't always go that way while we're making stuff, but I think that's kind of how I was going, and just pairing, colors that could clash or go well together. And then slowly just kind of dove in. I think I started making the skirt of my look first, as kind of like, I kind of started with like the most time consuming piece first, and then kind of worked my way into the easier, like accessories and smaller stuff. That's how I approached it.
That's great. Madeline.
So it's actually pretty similar to how I usually work. I work a lot with discarded materials. So a lot of my designing starts with the fabric or the material and just kind of being like, okay, what could this be? So I had so much fun opening the box and seeing what was in there, and just kind of letting the fabric speak to me, I guess, and had, this one huge piece of fabric. So I knew that that was kind of the main thing, and just sitting down and sketching and trying to figure out what I should make it. And I plan everything out before I start and have like really detailed notes. And then it usually changes as I go. And then I usually run out of time to do everything that I want to do. So I'll just work up to the last minute and do as much as I can.
Yeah, sort of that thing where a project will take the amount of time that it is given to take.
Yeah.
Madeline, I'm going to stay on you. What was your favorite material in your box, and what was the most challenging one?
I would say they were both the same, and it was the styrofoam eggs.
Yes, the styrofoam eggs.
I loved it. I couldn't stop laughing. You film yourself opening the box, and I couldn't stop laughing when I pulled out styrofoam eggs, because I was like, what do people even use this for normally? Like, I don't know what you do with styrofoam eggs, why you purchase them. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that and kind of doing a lot of Pinterest looking, seeing what other people do with styrofoam. It's kind of amazing what people can do with styrofoam. But ended up landing on finding out you could melt it down. So that's what I ended up doing.
How did you find that out? Was that a Pinterest thing, or? Yeah,
just a random Pinterest post about, it was kind of like a weirdly supposed to be like a kids activity, which I don't feel like is
kids
not.
Activity with acetone?
I don't know. Okay, right?
Sure.
I don't recommend it, but it was like putting styrofoam cups and like they shrink, and it was like the kids just watch, like they don't actually do anything.
Okay, that makes me feel
and they, when they were describing it, they're like, it's kind of like a gooey Play-Doh, and then it dries. And I was like, okay, I think I can work with this. So I did a lot of experimenting. I felt like a scientist.
It was wild, like seriously, such a creative use of that material. Like, bravo, that was awesome. Miranda, what was your favorite and most challenging material?
For me, my favorite right off the bat was the kind of floral upholstery fabric that I used for the garter belt and the bra. I just thought the print was so beautiful, and I am definitely more comfortable working with like sturdier woven fabrics. So I started there, and I knew the first idea that kind of formed that I knew I wanted to stick with was the garter belt using the 4 clips. So I kind of started from there and then pieced together everything else as I went, because I was running out of time at the end. But the most difficult for me, I got 2 little bundles of colorful yarn. I have some extra that was just the funkiest, brightest, like children's colors that I could not figure out how I was going to incorporate. I was like, maybe I could paint it. But I wanted something that was more usable and wearable. So I ended up making a kind of puffed braided headband from this purple silk. And I stuffed the yarn into there. So it really worked out that you don't have to see the yarn at all, but it's still incorporated. But that was like the very last thing that I figured out.
Yeah, that's really smart to use the material as a filler or as a structural element. That's really, really creative. Chris, what about you? Favorite and most challenging?
I think my favorite was I got a bunch of yardage of some red wool. So just like a thick red wool, and I normally haven't really worked with that before. And it was also like the middle of winter. So I was like, okay, kind of just gonna go with this. And I loved working with wool, and I love the texture of it and the kind of like coarseness I thought was really interesting. And my most challenging was less of a material and more of a tool. It was the button cover, like little snap thing that you can do to get covered buttons. I had to do so many of those to get the fabric to not slide out. And it just took me so long. And it was such a kind of a simple thing, but when I finally got it, I was so excited. So that was my least favorite probably.
There are places, I think there's one in Chicago. I know there's one in New York that all they do is covered buttons. Like that is their business, is making custom fabric covered buttons. Because as you say, it can be very finicky and very frustrating.
Yeah, I had multiple tools, like other things that I wasn't supposed to be using, but we figured it out. So
that's great. So Chris, staying on you. So a lot of what brings me to this event, DiscarDisco, and a lot of the work I do now is environmental concerns and the climate crisis. And how do those things impact how you think about your art and your design?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I mean, I think there's a couple different things that kind of steer me in that direction. But like, I think aside from it just being like a smarter and I feel like more ethical like option to kind of go to those materials first, like I just feel like it's less stressful for me in a way, and it's more fun. And I love being given random things and trying to make it work. Like I feel like my brain is more excited by that sort of challenge or way of working, as opposed to kind of like, I know exactly what I want, I'm gonna go get it. And so I think the whole DiscarDisco model just like works for me. So I think in my studio work and like when I go thrifting to buy clothes and stuff, like I just like things that have a little bit of a history and a story, and I am just drawn to those things like more naturally. So I usually go at those choices.
That's great. Yeah, I think Eleanor said something last year about how it's less stressful to use reused materials because you already know you're giving them a second life. So if it doesn't succeed, it's okay, which I definitely relate to.
Yeah, definitely when making clothes, like having some test stuff and some stuff that had a former life definitely makes things a little less stressful.
Yeah, I agree. Madeline, how about you?
I definitely agree with what you were saying, Chris, because it's almost like having limits like helps my creativity sometimes, and kind of like the problem solving aspect of it I really enjoy. And I mean, I really would love for our planet to be around as long as possible and want to do what I can to help with that. So every little bit helps. So
yeah, that's great. Well, I think what's great about DiscarDisco is it's not just your little bit, but it's promoting to other people how this can be done. So Miranda, how about you?
Yeah, for me, I don't know about y'all, but my background working in the fashion industry was really what changed just the way I saw the whole industry, just because you see just the excessive waste that happens every day. So that was honestly kind of overwhelming, but finding a way to just change my own practices and focus on what I can do and what I'm interested in and how I can use discarded materials and decrease waste in that way has been really helpful. And of course, it's, major corporations that are really killing the planet. So sometimes it's kind of, I go back and forth between like, okay, I'm doing my tiny little part and is that helpful or not? But I think it's important that if we all, are just interested in some aspect, like for us, it's discarded fabrics and fashion and that sort of thing. If people can find like an area that they care about for sustainability or circularity, then that's what we can do. And it helps a lot, and to be connected with other people who do it too.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought up that it's corporations that are causing the biggest chunk of the problem. I've been listening to a podcast recently that has been talking about like how Exxon invented the idea of a carbon footprint so that they could like pass on the guilt and shame to consumers about what we're using. And so just knowing like that was that we've been manipulated like that is very upsetting. And it is really challenging to like go back and forth between individual action and like systemic change, and like where should you be putting your time and attention. And it's stressful, it's frustrating. So Miranda, you touched on this a little bit already, but I'm always very interested in like what someone's eco-artistic origin story is, because I have like a moment in my life that was very catalyzing for me, really starting on this path that I usually tell. What was that moment for you?
For me, so I got a degree in apparel design and then moved here after graduation. So I was working like low-level design jobs when I first moved here. And yeah, like I said, just the really wild amounts of waste. What really got me was that at the end of every season, after we would, everything at that level is a knockoff. So we would buy clothes from other companies, sew our own tags into it, present it to buyers as our own. And then at the end of the season, we would have to put them in trash bags and throw them away. And we weren't allowed to donate them to charity. We weren't allowed to like do anything like that in case someone found out that we were knocking things off. So just putting mounds of clothing into a trash bag myself every few months was like you said, so just catalyzing. And that's when I kind of decided that I needed to work with secondhand fabrics and started to reach out and see what was in the community, things like Fab Scrap or resources I could find to help me do that.
Yeah, it's shocking how many companies and industries destroy excess product. I mean, you see it in grocery stores and clothing and furniture and all sorts of things. And it's honestly a little nauseating.
Oh, yeah. And that's before it even gets to the consumer. So, and then we had throwaway clothes or, because we have so much, and that this is just before any of that step even happens. I think so many people aren't aware of that because they're not part of the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Chris, do you have a moment that is sort of your eco-artistic origin story?
I think so. I went to college in Baltimore, Maryland, and one night I was like looking for materials, kind of like walking around, where I lived in Baltimore, and there's this bar behind the printmaking studio where we would all like do silk screening and stuff. And there are these two just perfectly opened but unused canvases just sitting in the alley. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm just going to take these, and then went in and screen printed on them and did whatever to them. But I think something clicked there that was just got me excited about finding stuff and the kind of challenge of addressing that as a problem in my work, but also embracing it as something that makes it different. And I also just really garment waste is enormous, but also I just feel there's just so many new art supplies that are created, and they're so expensive. And as a student, I was always I always was more concerned about how much money I was spending to make things than actually just making something that I liked. So I think that really just being a student and how everything was so precious, and I didn't have the sort of freedom to experiment with materials as much until I kind of got into that world.
Yeah, you're right. New art supplies can be very expensive, especially paper. Paper is amazingly expensive, and if you make one mistake, a brush you'll use for a while, and a tube of paint you'll use for a while, but paper is, oof. Madeline.
So my journey started pretty young. I learned to sew when I was 8 or something, and my mom was the queen of thrift shopping and garage sailing, and so that is where all of my materials came from. So it was always kind of discarded materials, things that people didn't want anymore, and me trying to figure out how to use them. And because of growing up with that mentality, I was always the person who save all my scraps, or I went to school for apparel design, and people would be throwing away their extra fabric, and I'd be like, well, why don't I just take that for you, and just always seeing like the potential in things that other people wanted to get rid of. And I think after college, I ended up at a factory job sewing, and I think that is where it really came to a head, where you see just like dumpsters full of material that is being thrown out, and I just really couldn't handle that. So that, combined with honestly just really, really hating working in a factory sewing is not for me. It really catapulted me into starting my own business, and I ended up taking a lot of their scraps that they would throw away, and I started making things out of them and selling them, because I just can't bear for useful things to be put in a landfill. And so now I have like a line of kits where I include discarded fabric in the kits and the pattern for other people to do it too. And I just trying to find a way to get it out there, to spread the joy of reusing things, and get rid of my ever-growing stash, because whenever anyone offers me fabric, I can't turn it down, because I'm like, well, if you're gonna throw it away, I'll take it.
Yeah. The holy grail is finding a way to recycle the small scraps. And I'm working on that for Chicago right now. New York, there's Fab Scrap, but yeah, we need something like that in Chicago to actually recycle the fibers. Yeah, I remember. So this is bringing back like my memories of why I really got into this, which was we were doing an opera when I was in undergrad, and there was like this $25 a yard silk, which to me at the time, when I'd mostly been shopping at Joann's previously, $25 a yard seemed enormously expensive, which now I know it's not. And we put, the scraps from cutting out the gowns for the opera in the trash, and then someone like dumped their cup of noodles from lunch on top of it afterwards. It was just like seeing that, like just watching it actually get destroyed was heartbreaking. So yeah, I absolutely relate to all of these stories that you are sharing right now. I'm really enjoying watching people in the chat. It was very small pieces. We kept a lot. It was anything that was a square foot or smaller that we actually put in the trash. But we're, everyone's working on better solutions. So my last question before we open it up, and I would love for Teresa and Eleanor to weigh in here too, is what are you working on now, and where can people see more of your work? So Madeline, I know you mentioned your kits, which we shouted out in the trivia as well. Is there anything that is brand new or coming up that you want to shout out?
I really don't have anything brand new. We're working on moving to a new house, so it's like everything's been put on hold. But I am super interested in zero waste designing, and hopefully I'm going to come out with a pattern for a zero waste dress, because I just find that absolutely fascinating. And yeah, so that's what I'm currently working on.
That's great. And I just put the link to your shop in the chat if anyone would like to go check that out. Miranda, what about you? What are you working on these days? Do you have your Halloween costume already figured out?
I don't, not yet. Just, hold off maybe another month or two and then
Okay.
start thinking. I sew, of course, using secondhand fabrics, discarded materials. You can find me on Instagram at What Miranda Makes. I have an Etsy that's linked through there, but I occasionally sell bags and some clothing. So Instagram's the best place to find that.
Awesome. Yeah. And your Instagram is great. I really enjoyed looking at some of your process shots. Chris, what about you? What are you working on these days, and where can people see more of you soon?
Yeah, right now I actually met someone through DiscarDisco that I'm dressing for an event that's coming up this week. So I had my first client that I dressed. So that was really exciting. And I'm going to dress her for another event in August, actually. So I'm super, super excited. And I'm going to a really big anime convention in Texas over the summer, and I want to do a cosplay with my best friend who lives down there, but I just don't know if I have time to squeeze that in. So I'll definitely try. But it might be like kind of a half upcycled, half sewn kind of situation, just to give myself a little break. But yeah.
I feel like there's an Instagram account of a cosplayer who specifically does reused materials, like the eco cosplayer or something.
Yes, I would love to see that.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of want to do like some thrifted and sew a little bit into it and kind of make it my own.
I love that. I love that idea. So great. What about the WasteShed? Any events coming up?
I'll let Eleanor talk about the workshop series if she's on right now, but because I have less to do with that planning, but we have a couple of volunteer events that I've been working on coordinating. I am obsessed with all the little bits that we have to go through at the WasteShed. So I'm the one who is the weirdo and created the button bay area. Like I go through the buttons and categorize them. Anyway, we're doing a button sorting party on the 24th. So it's like a tea and coffee during the day kind of thing. We sit down for a couple of hours and just go through the buttons, which is way more fascinating than you might think, because we get stuff from like the 1910s, like up until like the 80s, everything. And then we're gonna do beads and jewelry that night, which also takes a lot of time, and there's like tons to go through. So that's the 24th, it's a Tuesday. And these are all on the wasteshed.com/volunteer. And then the 26th, that's a Thursday, we're gonna be doing a fabric sorting party. So it's gonna be preparing fabric. So anybody who's interested in reused fabrics, I'd love to see any of you. Volunteers do get store credit for every hour they volunteer. They get $1 store credit. And if you come to one of the sorting parties, you can also take like a free couple yards of fabric at the end of the night. So that'll be the 26th. And then we have a massive move going on in our Evanston location, and we're looking for people who might be interested in volunteering on the June 5th. So the first Sunday of June, we are doing a moving party that's going to be 9 to 5. If you have a couple of hours to spare, we're going to have a whole bunch of things going on, and there'll be like drinks and snacks and everything. So if you're interested, I'll have those links up to sign up for that day on our website soon. But I would love to see you. I'm in the store Thursdays, Fridays. So if anybody wants to come by, please say hi.
Cool. And I just put the link to the wasteshed.com/calendar in the chat so that people can see those events that Teresa just mentioned.
Yeah.
Eleanor, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for those the volunteer updates, Teresa. Yeah, we also currently have a workshop program that's sort of it's really cool. We got sponsored by the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events through their Neighborhood Access Program to do low-cost artist workshops, sort of both in our space and in other, in partnership with other organizations around the neighborhood. So that's been kind of slowly getting going in the last couple of months. I think in terms of textile stuff, the most exciting one I think that we have on the calendar right now is we have 2 soft doll making workshops with Jojo Baby, who's a world-class doll maker and makes like these kind of Cabbage Patch looking. He's really an incredible like fabric creature master. So I highly recommend those, and they're very limited spots, so I definitely recommend checking those out. So those are on, I think, June 2nd and 9th. It's a 2-part workshop. But there's some pretty great stuff on there. So definitely keep an eye out for our workshops. We're also working on planning DiscarDisco 2023, which is happening. I believe we have a date for it. I think we said February 9th, but we are also on the lookout for venues. So if anyone has a line on like a, affordable, cool venue that can fit a couple hundred people, and do a nice little runway situation, please give a holler, because we are on the market for that. In terms of what I'm working on right now, I am making the closet core Jenny overalls, which is the first time I've actually bought, like, paid money for an actual, like, new pattern, because it's very hard to find secondhand overalls patterns. They just like do not exist. And I'm using this fabric that I had to bring home from the store that is covered. It's still screened with all these like silent, like classic movie stars.
I love
And there was
that.
just, like, so much of it, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, I have to do something with this. So that's my project right now. It's taking up my dining table. So
I love it. I love it.
So I actually made my own wedding dress, and I used fabric from my mom's dress and my grandmother's and my aunt's dresses, and combined them also with curtains from the thrift store, weirdly, and made my wedding dress. So that is obviously very, very sentimental.
They should all incorporate curtains from the thrift store in some way.
Yeah, it's always curtains from the thrift store. Those are curtains from the thrift store.
For me, I don't know that there's any one particular fabric that I'm super sentimental about or saving, although there's plenty that I've had forever and I'm just saving because I think we all just try to wait for the perfect project to come. But I do have like a secondhand clothing, I guess, has more sentimental value. Like I have a denim jacket of my mom's. That's something that's really special to me and cool to have.
It's amazing.
For me, I went down to Texas to visit my grandparents in the fall, kind of before we got our boxes. And my grandpa was a petroleum engineer for Texaco, the oil company, and he had like his boiler suit that they would wear like when they would go to refineries and stuff. And so I I don't know if he knows this, but I cut it in half and I made like a jacket out of it and put lapels on it, and I bleach dyed it, and he had all these patches, so I like just sewed all the patches on one jacket, and I haven't worn, I'm just afraid to wear it anywhere because I just love it. But I'll show him one day, but I don't think he's seen it yet. So I don't know if he's gonna be happy, but I wanted to like kind of just transform something that he had, and I love that piece, and I don't know where I'll wear it, but I'll find a place.
That sounds amazing. I need to see pictures. Teresa or Eleanor?
I actually have a good example. Actually, maybe it's more of a question because it's a material that needs to be resolved into something that isn't just sitting in a bin in the middle of my living room for some reason, because sometimes that happens. These are my dad's hippie pants from the 70s. That are
cool.
Just, like, all patches all over, and have like weird little like sewn on like stuff. I feel like I should, Chris, I should maybe consult with you about this because this feels like in your wheelhouse a little bit.
I love those.
I love them in high school, and I added some patches and attempted to, I think I, tried to stay with the general vintage of the thing, but they're, I mean, obviously not wearable anymore. They're likely to fall apart at any time. But I guess I'm soliciting suggestions for what to do with them because I will just never get rid of these, but they're so great. And yes, that's my answer to that.
They're very good.
I have two materials I'm trying to figure out what to do with, but I recently had to say goodbye to my buddy, my dog, and I have puppy teeth from him. And I've been trying to figure out what to do with puppy teeth in like an art project or something. And I was thinking a lot about how Jojo Baby actually makes every sculpture. This is the artist that's doing our workshop, but every sculpture that he does that is a human, he puts real teeth in it, which is something that I've always thought was incredibly insane, but great. But I was thinking about making like a little plush puppy, representation of my dog with that. But I don't know, that's probably my most sentimental things. Everything else I pretty much just grab from the store and I suddenly feel sentimental about something I've never seen before. Like I think it's a really common thing when you're at a thrift store. But yeah, that's probably my one like very like personal material that I have right now that I'm trying to work with. But yeah.
That's really interesting. I'm very interested to see what you end up doing with that. I think it's also worth mentioning that Jojo Baby was one of the judges of a previous DiscarDisco, so there's a good tie in there too.
I really have a question.
Yeah, go for
I'm
it.
curious what you guys have done or are doing with your DiscarDisco outfits. Like, do you still have yours from past years, Chris? Or, are you gonna keep your dress, Miranda? Does it fit you? Did it fit your mom? What do people do with them?
I have held on to it for sure. I don't know, like I kind of have an inclination to rework it or something, but I kind of just love working up to that experience and just kind of holding on to it. Like the garments I make for this, like I just love, even though like they're not perfect. And you spend so much time on this project and I just like, I can't do anything with that. I just have to like keep it and I don't want to give it to anyone. If it, worked its way into a photo shoot or something, would not be mad about that, but I definitely would not, I don't think, give it away for sure.
For me, I think the garter belt fits me at least, and I think that could be like wearable and worked in. I could probably end up reusing the purple silk for something else just because it's such a big piece of yardage. But until then, I'll keep it as is, see what comes up.
I am not sure, which is why I asked.
Fair enough.
I tend to be very sentimental about things that I've put a lot of time into. And so I definitely am like, I can't just get rid of it, but also it is tiny and I do not fit into it. And I asked my model if she wanted it because she's my friend, and she was like, I don't know what I would wear it to. I don't know either. But I don't know. Yeah, I was thinking it could be reworked. It could maybe end up as like a pattern in my future or something, like use it as a, the base for a new pattern. I don't know.
I think yours is so wearable. Like I think it's beautiful. You could put that, like wear that to an event or something, or someone could if it doesn't fit.
Right. It doesn't fit me. Yeah, which is funny because actually during the event, since I was new to this, I'd never been to the DiscarDisco. During the actual event, I was like, wow, I really think that I misjudged like how creative and like wild, like everybody else's stuff was like way further out there, and mine was a little more wearable. And I was like, I think I missed the mark on this.
Your pattern is so beautiful.
I think there's a whole range of stuff. There was a really wide variety. I know I participated one year and I deliberately made something that I thought I would wear again. I haven't worn it again because I was working right up until the deadline and I was like, oh, I want to adjust these things before I actually wear it. And then of course it sat in my closet and hasn't been worn.
Also, you had the styrofoam eggs.
Blair, any insights? What did you do with yours from last year? Do you still have it?
I know I'm not on the panel, but I just wanted to jump in because I was reached out to last year by this wonderful activist and organizer who put on the Fashion Fuel Independence Day last year, and met some incredible sustainable sewists outside of the WasteShed. And I just think that there's some really exciting sustainable movements, including Scrap Squad. But these pieces that we've made and you've made they're art. I mean, there's no other word for it. So I had the opportunity, and I hope everyone else on the panel gets the opportunity to showcase them. So I definitely have hung on to mine to use for future sustainability events and runways. They're out there, but please don't take your dress apart. It was so pretty, Madeline.
it might surprise any of you guys to know that I did make an entire outfit out of trash materials for Junk to Funk, which was a trash fashion show that happened in Portland. I think that was in like 2014 or something. And I was very hard ass about like all just actual garbage for that one. So it relied heavily on fishing line because I was involved with Scrap, which is the Creative Reuse Center in Portland at the time. And there was a guy whose like hobby it was on weekends to go and recover all of this fishing line from like the rivers. He would like walk along like the like lakefront or whatever bodies of water he could find and just recover and like re-reel fishing line, which was amazing. So I used that and like a lot of plastic bags and coffee filters, which had not been used, but which had been donated to the place to Scrap, like medical tubing. There was a lot of these little plastic medical tube guys that I used.
Hopefully also not used.
Which I think were not used. No, as far as I could tell, they had not actually. They were like something to cover something,
Sure.
Like some little safety doodad. Yeah, so that was a fun experiment. It was very, very labor intensive, and it's but yeah, it was a fun experiment to be like, how do I make something that's sort of like structurally sound out of all these materials? And I think we've also had like in our sort of first DiscarDisco was more kind of like everybody bring their own materials, and we definitely had a couple of entries that were much more like just made from plastic bags or like some discarded stuff. So that was pretty cool in terms of like sort of materials challenges. We might try and sort of reincorporate that into further DiscarDiscos going forward to try and have more of a like unconventional materials challenge or something.
I haven't made anything completely from trash, I don't think. But I've started crocheting again recently and was just seeing the way that you can use plastic bags to create yarn and crochet with that. So that may be something that I try sometime soon.
Made something completely of trash, but for some reason I'm just thinking about like potato chip bags and like flipping them over to the silver side and then just being like the grease would just get all over you, and for some reason I think that would be really cool. So I would definitely want to use that.
I love that.
I love that you would incorporate the grease. That's just great.
I think it would photograph well too,
I think if you layer those up and kind of iron them together, they sort of fuse and get more stable too. So that's probably
Also, if you bake them, they like shrink to like they're like shrinky dinks almost. They shrink to a certain size and they get like kind of hard. So I was like making this is totally something random, but it reminded me of this material that was like a weird leather material. They used to make puppets out of them in Mexico when I was like a little kid. But it's like this leathery. So like if you take like chip bags and you bake them down, you can like kind of stretch them out while they're still hot and like mold them. And I was like, oh, I kind of want to make like a little like doll vest or something out of it. It's a weird material if you bake them. But randomly, talking about trash fashion shows, I don't know if any of you have rewatched Zoolander recently, but I completely forgot that there's a whole trash fashion show scene in that movie.
Yeah.
I just rewatched it the other day and I was like, oh my God, there's literally somebody who comes out of a trash bag. Anyway, random thought there. But yeah, you should do a chip bag dress or vest or something. It'd be cool.
I agree.
Thanks for the tip about baking it. I'm definitely gonna try that.
I don't, it's not strictly trash, but kind of related. I made a dress out of leaves before, like leaves that fell off the trees in the fall. And I guess technically there was like some tulle underneath to sew the leaves too, but it was very interesting because it was like a time limit where I did it all in one day because then the leaves dried out and like crumbled and were gone. And so it was just kind of trash, but not really.
It's really cool.
That's awesome. There's an Australian artist named, her handle is Marina Debris. I don't think that's her actual name, but she makes trash out of ocean waste that she finds washed up on the beach. And her garments are so beautiful and sculptural. I've heard her talk about them, and apparently because it is all legit trash you picked up on the beach, some of it is smelly. But yeah, look her stuff up because it's absolutely stunning. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, panelists, for sharing your time. Thank you, Eleanor and Teresa, for running the WasteShed, and Kat and Amber from AIBI. This is a wonderful community, and I am so excited that we have really started to come together and solidify as creative reusers.
Thank you so much for hosting this. This is so great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. This was delightful. So good to see everybody.